This is Edge of the Box, a podcast brought to you by WhoScored.com.
Hello, welcome to Edge of the Box, a podcast by WhoScored.com. Episode 3 of 8 coming up as we continue with our Euro 2020 show. So don't forget to subscribe and like and all that jazz so you know when the shows are coming out. It's my favourite time of the week as I get to chase Jonathan's validation and pull funny faces at Martin's points for an hour. So let's crack on with the show. Come to you first, Jonathan. Not going to chase validation straight off the bat, but
you're doing very well.
It's been a very, very good Euro so far. I'm really enjoying it. What's it been like from your perspective, obviously watching it from home?
Yeah, I mean, it is different for me, and I'm sort of, every sort of impression I have of the tournament, I'm sort of trying to work out, am I thinking that because I'm not there? Because, you know, I've covered 21 major tournaments in the last, since 2000. So the last major tournament, as in a World Cup or Euros I wasn't at, was the World Cup in 2002. So this is very different, doing this from home. And maybe it's just more fun because you're not, staying in bad hotels and spending half your time slogging around on trains and planes and, living on a diet of cheese sandwiches because, that's all you can grab in the station or in the stadium. But it feels to me that this has actually been a really positive, good start of the tournament that, if you look at Euro 2016, I sort of felt the group stage then was a bit of a slog that, the 48 games of the group stage to eliminate 8 teams, and 15 of the 16 teams you went through had the best qualifying records. So if you just taken the 16 teams with the best qualifying records, the only difference I think was you'd have had Austria there instead of Hungary, and 48 teams to work that out seems like an awful lot. But this time, those sort of 8 additional teams, the 8 teams with the weakest qualifying record have all done pretty well, apart from probably Scotland and North Macedonia. But even North Macedonia, I'd rather have a new nation, and I like that aspect of qualifying. That if you have a good generation, if you're a smaller nation with a good generation, rather than having to wait for 10 years while you build up your coefficient to get a draw that's not impossible, they do have that potential route in. So I think North Macedonia offer more to the tournament than a team who's sort of used to qualifying, who sort of slogs through looking to get 4 points by defending and going through. But those other 7 sides, you've had Finland who've won a game, you've had Czech Republic who've won a game, you've had Slovakia who've won a game, you've had Austria who've won a game, Hungary went through the playoffs, and although they lost, that was a big occasion, being 60,000 fans.
Yeah, it was great.
Scotland, who, obviously weren't great and lost, but again, in their own stadium, and it had a sense of an event. North Macedonia but Wales have been great, 4 points.
Yeah,
so
really
it doesn't really feel like there's been a weak team, and it's felt much more proactive. I think international football can be quite stodgy. This doesn't really feel like it has been. Now, whether that's because I'm sitting in comfort in my front room rather than watching it in a bad hotel, I don't know, but it's felt good so far.
Yeah, I mean, we might come on to them, but I think Turkey have looked about the worst team so far, which is a complete surprise. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've been having had very high hopes for them. The younger squad in the tournament, loads of great midfielders. Burak Yilmaz coming off a season when he'd been a huge factor in Lille winning the league. I think they've been really slow and sluggish and unimpressive. And they're by far the biggest disappointment for me.
Yeah, look completely off the pace. Martin, I understand you've got a player review from the first round of fixtures. You've got a top 10 for us.
I do indeed, yeah. And everyone's bet for the top player of the tournament from the first round of games came in. It was indeed Lukas Hradecky in our ratings. The highest rated player from the first round of fixtures was the Finland goalkeeper. So not that you could bet on that, but if you could, you'd have got pretty good odds. He was the highest rated. And then the top 10, you've got your sort of the players, a lot of the players that you'd expect, the ones that scored a brace. So you've got, who have we got in there? You've got Ronaldo, Lukaku, Immobile was in there as well. Schick was in second. He was the closest to Hradecky. I thought Schick was excellent against Scotland. That was one of the best sort of centre-forward displays of the tournament so far, I think. Braylen Mbolo, obviously not last night, but from his first game was excellent as well. He was sort of a coming-of-age performance because what tournament was it that he broke through? And everyone, it would have been 2016, wouldn't it? Or 2014, maybe, the World Cup. But a lot of big things were expected from him, and it's fair to say he hasn't really kicked on. But he caused Wales all sorts of problems in that first game. So he was third in our rankings. So yeah, some really good performances so far, and yeah, Schick in particular was the one that really impressed me from that first game. I thought he was superb, not just because of the completely outrageous goal, but his first goal was excellent as well, and he was a threat all game. He had 6 shots, 5 of them on target. Both of those were the sort of stat leaders for those categories for the first round of games. So yeah, he impressed me the most personally.
So Schick was your standout player from that first round of fixtures, and he's in your top 10. Jonathan, who would you pick as your standout, and we'll see if they've made the top 10?
Well, it's a slightly difficult question, I guess. There's players you know are really good who then impress you. Schick was somebody who I sort of feel like he's sort of bubbled under for a long time. We've been waiting for him to sort of do something, and he hasn't ever quite done it. But yeah, I agree he was excellent. Slightly surprised that Hradecky is that highly rated. I thought he was... I mean, I know he kept a clean sheet and saved the penalty, but I thought he was really shaky on crosses in that game. But
he actually, I agree that he did look it, but he also claimed the most crosses of any goalkeeper. So actually caught, that means the most crosses of any goalkeeper. So that was clearly a tactic from Denmark to put balls in on him. I know he did flap at a couple, but yeah, he claimed 3. No other keeper claimed that many. Yeah. Made the most saves, saved the penalty, kept a clean sheet. So I agree. He didn't look entirely convincing, but those things are always going to sort of weigh in your favour.
And there's always, there's a massive danger of sounding trite given what happened in that game. But I was covering it, and I didn't make any notes after the 42nd minute, apart from the goal and the penalty, because the piece was not going to be about the game. But all my notes up to the 42nd minute had been, I don't fancy Hradecky. Hradecky's dropped another cross. This is looking bad for Finland. So maybe he had a very good second half and I just didn't notice. But yeah, so to get back to the question, the player who I hadn't really ever considered before, who has stood out, and not just the first round of games, but also last night, was Spinazzola, the Italy left back, who I thought in terms of the way they attacked, was hugely important, giving him width on the left, despite being right-footed. So there's a touch of Zambrotta about him, I think, in that regard. But a player who, I don't think it would ever have occurred to me to list in if you said who are you of top 10 left backs, I wouldn't even been in my brain.
Well, that's the thing. Like Mancini had been playing Emerson, hadn't he, at left back? Even though Emerson doesn't get a game for Chelsea, Emerson was getting a lot of games in qualifying ahead of him. So I completely agree. Came out of nowhere, really.
And he's only played 51 games in the last 3 seasons for Roma, and before that, I don't know, half a dozen loan moves. And he's not young. He's I think he's 28. He whether that's sustainable or whether he's one of those players who just has a great month at exactly the right time. But so far, if you're asking me for a team of the tournament, he would absolutely be my left back.
Yeah, he's got incredible energy levels even at the end of the game. He was bombing on last night from left back. Italy we'll come on to later, but they've been so impressive. And just quickly, I'd pick out Jorginho because I think he's just so important to what Italy are trying to do, and his levels of passing and his defensive positioning, not in terms of interceptions and picking up the ball, but I think just the positions he takes up defensively. I think he's a really, really intelligent player. Let's move on to England versus Scotland, then the big one, the one everyone's waiting for on Friday night. England, of course, dispatched Croatia on Sunday. Scotland, returning to international football tournaments on Monday, got not taken apart, but got well beaten by Czech Republic in the end on Monday. An unhappy return for them. Jonathan, you were slightly negative going into England's campaign. Has anything changed your mind around England's potential round of 16 exit that you predicted?
Not really.
No?
Well, I didn't expect Croatia to be very good. I thought they were an ageing side who was struggling.
Yeah, you called that. You did call that.
Struggling to bring in new players. The first 20 minutes, England were really good. And I was sort of thinking, actually, maybe I have underestimated this lot. I was interested with the comments from Bonucci saying that England were the team who most impressed him in the first round of games, which surprised me slightly. But I sort of feel now there's almost a template for international football that everybody's trying to be like France. You have that very solid, even if you've got very, very good players, if you can get that very solid base with the two holding midfielders. Maybe that's not quite giving Pogba the correct title, but the two players who sit deep in front of your back four, and you have that sort of 6-man block, and then you sort of think, well, if we've got enough talent in other positions, eventually a goal will come. So England's win felt very like that they were never really under pressure. Croatia did have some nice spells of possession, but never looked at all like penetrating England, which I think is a big difference from 2018 when they had possession and suddenly, in the middle of that second half, started getting chances. I think they really missed Mandzukic. They missed that focal point up front. And then England, while in control after that first sort of 20 minutes, they didn't really create much, but had enough and scored a very, very good goal and won 1-0 without really looking threatened, which I guess if you're looking to build into the tournament, that's absolutely the way you want to start.
Yeah, Martin, England, a bit like Jonathan says a team needs to be to win the tournament, a bit boring when they needed to, but I was a bit like Bonucci. I thought he was a really, really strong performance because it's not often England come up against one of the better nations and pull off a win, to be honest.
Yeah, like Jonathan says, Croatia, I think we touched on it last week, they are sort of regressing. They're not on the up, but at the same time, they are a capable team, and England were one of the only sort of big hitters, so to speak, who really sort of shut out a team like that. Even France against Germany, it's quite a basketball type game. Germany didn't have a lot of chances, but it was a very open game, whereas England really did control that game, and Croatia were bad, don't get me wrong, but England deserve credit for really limiting them in that sense. And I think the players that you really wanted to play well in that game all did. The players that were under pressure, I think that was really important. If you think that when you saw the lineup, a lot of people didn't like the look of it. None of us picked Sterling to be in our lineups, did we? So that was not a surprise, because I think most people were thinking he probably will pick him, but most people were hoping that he probably didn't. But Sterling, although he still had his normal problems, not particularly decisive, dallied a couple of times, he wasn't perfect. But at the same time, he was the threat. There were people that came out of that game and said, "Oh, Sterling, he scored, but he didn't play well." But he was the threat. He was the really important player in the attack for England in that game. I thought Foden, after his early chance where he nearly scored a great goal, he also plucked that one out of the air. But if you're a player of that sort of talent, that ability, you can do that. But for the rest of the game, I thought it was pretty quiet. They struggled to get him into the game, whereas Sterling was always involved, and Kane was obviously quiet. But the other two were obviously Calvin Phillips, who was deservedly the man of the match, most pertinently for playing in a role that we hadn't seen him. I don't think nobody thought that Calvin Phillips could do that, really, or there wasn't a lot of evidence that he could, because he obviously plays this sort of protector role for Leeds, the sort of Yorkshire Pirlo, protecting the back four and spraying the passes. But he charged on and played really, really well, obviously set up the goal really well. And then Tyrone Mings, obviously under a huge amount of pressure. I feel slightly vindicated in my shout ahead of the tournament that he is good enough to play in these games, and that we could play a back four. And while he might go on and have a stinker somewhere else, I do think he came out of that game with a great amount of credit, because there were people, and England fans as well, that were setting him up for a fall, almost wanted him to play badly so they could just be like, "Oh, I told you so." But yeah, he came through that really, really well. And obviously there's a big debate now about whether that partnership continues moving forward.
Yeah, I actually liked Mings and Stones as a pair. I thought they were really good at keeping each other focused. I thought they complemented each other well in that game, Jonathan. Harry Maguire has declared himself fit. What do England do now, or what do you think Southgate will do? To
bring somebody in straight away would be a mistake. So I think, by all means, give him 20 minutes, test that out. But I don't know why. I don't see any need to break up a partnership that seems to be working and take a risk on a player who's still feeling his way back to fitness. So, that's the luxury you have, I guess, having won a game, that the immediate pressure of getting through is dissipated a bit, and so you can make maybe 3 or 4 changes against Scotland. You can adjust to the threat Scotland pose, and you can start to spread out the minutes. Yeah.
Martin, Southgate, we feel like he'll want to get Jordan Henderson back in his team. He'll want to get Harry Maguire back in his team, because they're two of his favourite players. They're players that he trusts and that he knows well. But it would be really harsh to take Phillips or Mings out now.
Yeah, he's got that headache now, hasn't he? And I agree with Jonathan.
I guess it's a nice headache.
It is. But I agree with Jonathan. I certainly don't think he can drop Phillips. And I don't think he can drop Mings either. I just think they both played well. The other guys are fitness concerns. Obviously, you want to get minutes in their legs. But I think maybe the argument that you would say for Maguire is if he is fit and he says he's fit, do you play an 80% Harry Maguire or 100% Tyrone Mings? I'd still play 100% Tyrone Mings based on how he played in the last game. But he might be thinking, if Maguire says he's fit, if he can get through this game, this Scotland game, and we win it, I fully expect England to name an entirely different 11 against Czech Republic anyway. And then he's got a little bit, he's got the minutes in his legs, and he's also got a little bit more of a rest period before the round of 16 game, rather than miss the Scotland game, play the Czech Republic game, and then he's playing, 4 or 5 days later. So he might want a little bit more gap between those games. So that might come into his thinking. But personally, I wouldn't agree with that. I would go with Mings and then probably play Maguire. Obviously, it's all conjecture based on his fitness, but I'd probably play Maguire against Czech Republic.
Right, so all three of us did our 11s that we would pick going into the Croatia game. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being wrong, because we said it's our 11s. Everyone's got different opinions of who they think should play. So we're going to reflect on that a little bit now. Martin, you got 9 out of 11. Well done to you. Jonathan, you got 8. I mean, he's not even getting this right, is he? Because
the question wasn't. Our own 11. If the question was, what team do you think Southgate will pick? Then I would have had Sterling in there, because I was 95% confident Sterling was going to play. Personally, I would have gone with Sancho, but actually, I probably would have been wrong because Sterling was good. So, and that's one of the problems of international football, isn't it? That Sterling, actually, if you look back at it, Sterling has been in good form for quite a while for England. It's just the last couple of months at City he hasn't been in form, and made that really interesting comment when he was asked about that, when he said, and there were reasons for that.
Yeah.
And was never pushed on that. I really would like to know what they are.
That was the immediate thing I picked up. I was like, what does he mean there? That's clearly a bit of a pointed sort of remark at Pep Guardiola or someone.
It might just be the kind of, all he means by that is, we've got a big squad, we've had a lot of rotation, and it suddenly turned out that playing Mahrez and Foden worked really well, so I didn't get a look in. It might be as innocent as that. But I'd quite like to know. I'd quite like to have seen that probed a bit more. But
if you'd have been the journalist on duty, you'd have got that out of him, wouldn't you, Jonathan?
I doubt I'd have asked the first question to get that answer, to be honest.
Right, so as I said, Martin, 9 out of 11. Jonathan, you picked 8 of the members that started the game, and myself, 7. Jonathan, you went for Chilwell and Sancho, and neither even got in the squad, which tells you the incredible depth that England have at the moment. None of us had Sterling to start, as we've already pointed out. I didn't have the man of the match in there, Phillips, in my team, but fair play to him because I thought he was excellent, and he'd definitely be in my team now. The general public on Twitter, they voted my 11 as their favourite, which shows you how really stupid international football is, really. Doesn't it?
Or the public, one of the two.
or me. We'll throw my hat into the ring as well. But interesting. What changes then would you make from that winning team for the Scotland game? Would there be anyone that you'd put in, Martin, that you think, for this type of game, he should start?
I think there's only really 2 that anyone's really talking about, I think.
Yeah.
And that's putting in a left back, which was obviously the big sort of decision ahead of that game, was to play Kieran Trippier at left back, and he played very well there again, and he's played there a few times for England now and played well on every occasion. So Southgate will say he's vindicated in that, and I'd agree with him. He said after the game that he's a defensive animal, didn't he? And basically he loves him. And I think we'll see plenty more of Kieran Trippier over the tournament. But the argument is, do you bring Shaw in? Do you bring Chilwell? I guess it looks like Shaw, because Chilwell wasn't even in the squad, like you say. So people will say, because I think one of the question marks was Kyle Walker, certainly in possession at least, didn't look that strong in the first half in particular. I thought he defended very well, actually. It's a case of, I think most people would probably move Trippier over to the right and then bring Shaw in. But personally, I don't think he'll do that. I think he'll name the same team. And the other one I would say would have been maybe Foden and Grealish, just because, like I said before, I thought Foden was quite quiet. But obviously Jack Grealish trained on his own for one of the days this week, so there's still question marks there over his fitness.
I've been told it's nothing to worry about.
Yeah, well, they would say that though, wouldn't they? But I do think those friendlies were interesting. The fact that they said they needed to manage Grealish's workload, and he played the most minutes in those games by a distance. And obviously, you want to get minutes in his legs, but I thought that was quite odd that he almost completed both of those games. But yeah, Grealish for Foden would be the possible other one. But like I said, I don't think he'll do it. I think he'll stick with the same team, and I'd stand by that. And then I think, like I said, I think if they can beat Scotland, I fully predict that he'd name an entirely different team against the Czech Republic, personally.
Jonathan?
Well, I think the other issue you have against Scotland is who's Scotland's best player. And if Tierney's still out, it's absolutely definitely Andy Robertson. It's maybe Andy Robertson anyway. So if you've got a very attacking left wing back, you've got to make sure that right side is defensively sound.
Yeah.
And that probably gives Foden the nod over Grealish. I mean, you could see it the other way around and say, well, let's give him a defensive headache on that side. But do you want Grealish playing on the right? You probably don't.
Conversely, do you think you could play Mount there and move Foden centrally?
You could play Mount. I mean, that's how he played against Belgium, wasn't it? He played Mount on the right.
Just thinking off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, I one of the things I thought was a little bit surprising in that Croatia game was that Sterling and Foden didn't swap occasionally, just because they clearly can play on the other side, and just to sort of change the threat slightly. Do you then play Trippier on the right because is he a better defensive player than Walker, or do you think Walker's pace against Robertson's a useful weapon? I don't really think there's a right answer there, but I can see why the right side would not be a side to take risks with. So I mean, I sort of said blithely make 3 or 4 changes, but when it actually comes to think what they might be, maybe there aren't any. Fiddle around with the fullbacks, perhaps, maybe introduce Grealish at some point, but other than that, I guess Scotland will probably sit deep against England, so maybe you do want a little bit more creativity, but then that gives Foden more of a chance to come in off a wing and begin to create things and maybe link up with Mount. Not huge changes.
I think I'd make 2 changes. I think they need a natural left back in this game. I thought from watching Scotland, I thought it was clear that their weak link was O'Donnell at right wing back. He did not look comfortable for the duration of the game. I didn't think in possession, out of possession. I looked at him as someone that could really be got at. So I think having a natural left-footed fullback down that side would be a real advantage to England. And I just think this is Grealish's type of game. Like Jonathan says, a team that sits deep. I think absolutely Grealish should start. The amount of free kicks he'd buy, I think he caused them real problems, but then it would then pose the problem of probably having to move Sterling to the right-hand side. But I quite like the idea of that Mount on the right-hand side, to be honest. So we'll see what happens anyway. I'd lean towards probably Gareth Southgate probably will name an unchanged 11, but we will see. Jonathan, Scotland's performance against Czech Republic then. Talk us through it.
Well, it wasn't bad.
No.
And in some ways, the thing that surprised me there was that the Czechs have been, after conceding the 5 at Wembley, the Czechs have been very good in defensively in qualifying, that they only let in 6 goals in the 7 games after that. And yet Scotland did create chances. And on another day, I think the Czechs deserve to win it, but Scotland could easily nick that on another day. The 2 goals they concede the Czechs are a major threat from set pieces. We know that. The other goal is a brilliant goal, slightly freakish. A couple of it took 2 or 3 slightly odd things to coincide. So the fact that the rebound from a shot falls perfectly for Schick, the fact that Schick hits that shot absolutely perfect, the fact that Marshall is 10 yards too far advanced for whatever reason. So I don't think you can say there's a massive structural issue with that goal. Dykes had that one chance that the keeper saved with his foot. There was the effort to hit the bar. So obviously it was hugely disappointing, and obviously it fits a pattern of Scotland disappointing in their first game at major tournaments that goes back, way back to their first World Cups in 54 was Scotland's first World Cup. So that's problematic for them, obviously. But the truth is they probably needed to get something out of that game if they are to have a decent chance of going through. Best third place team gives them a chance because if they beat Croatia, but they probably need a point at Wembley. So you assume they will sit deep and try and dig in. They maybe they maybe could have been a bit more aggressive earlier and played Adams and Dykes.
Yeah.
Rather than Ryan. But Ryan Christie's been very good in qualifying, so maybe that's unfair. But I think the way that Dykes-Adams partnership had looked against Luxembourg and against the Netherlands in those two friendlies, I thought I was a little bit surprised that they didn't start with that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jonathan. Martin, I thought Scotland looked way more imperious with Che Adams on the pitch. That just having someone running in behind, someone with a bit of movement, it just gave them a different dimension that they didn't really have in the stodgy first half.
Yeah, I think a lot of the problems, or a lot of the sort of gripes, were that they were going too long to Dykes straight away, wasn't it, in the sort of first half as well. And I agree, but I do agree with Jonathan. They created chances. They probably created more decent chances than I thought they would. They didn't look that bad in that sense. Didn't take those chances, and I don't even think they defended badly. It's just that Tierney absence was really key in terms of the build up from the back, wasn't it? I don't know how far in advance that was known. Personally, I didn't know he was going to be out for that game. I don't know how far in advance that was known, because if that was a late sort of withdrawal from the squad, so to speak, then it is difficult on Clark to make that snap decision. Does he change system? Does he try and play another player who can play out from the back? But I don't think they really have that. So yeah, that was an issue, and they did keep going long. But I also think the fans were great. Don't get me wrong, but almost the fans went against them in the end, just because, especially when that second goal went in. I think the manner of that goal just sucks the life out of a crowd. So when you concede a goal like that and it takes it to 2-0, it's just like, well, this isn't our day. And it just went flat. It just went really flat. And I think that was a problem, but I don't think they'll have that problem against England. So we'll see. I do expect Scotland to make more changes than England, that's for sure. But at the same time, I know a lot of Scotland fans were very disappointed. And I'm not Scottish, so I don't feel disappointed. But I didn't think they played that badly.
No,
Schick's header was excellent. You can defend it better, possibly get out to the cross better, but that sort of leap and that direction of header, there wasn't a huge amount they could do. And then the second goal was an absolute freak, and they should have scored themselves. So yeah, it could have gone another way on a different day. But in terms of the performance, I wouldn't be too disheartened personally.
No, I've done podcasts through the week this week, and I've been really surprised at the Scotland side of things and the negativity. And I think I agree with you about the crowd. It's almost like taking it out on the wrong people. Obviously, they're frustrated that they've been so long without being in a tournament. These guys have got them into a tournament, and okay, they didn't get off to a great start, but it felt like all the years of frustration was being let out of the guys that have actually got you into the tournament. I thought it was quite strange, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, this is set up for a perfect Scottish tournament, isn't it? That I don't know, maybe they get a point against England or lose narrowly, and they go into that last game into Croatia needing to win by 2 or 3 to get through as the best third place team. Obviously, they wouldn't quite know that at the time, but they might be able to sort of predict something like that. And yeah, they find themselves 3-1 up with a minute to go, at which, I don't know, Rebic smashes one in from 35 yards and hearts are broken in the traditional manner.
Yeah, own goal, last minute own goal. That's what I can envisage happening. We're going to try now and see what the combined. Well, we're not going to try. We are going to see what the combined England and Scotland 11 is. But before we do that, Jonathan, come to you first. Anyone from the Scotland team that you would have in the England 11?
I think there's only 2 really who would have a chance, and Tierney might be injured, and would I play him on the left of a 3, possibly, and then Robertson? But it turns out England don't even play a left back now, and already have 2 quite good ones in their squad. So, Robertson and Tierney are the only 2 who'd be close, I think.
Yeah, I've got down Robertson in the team. I'd have him at left back. I think he's just better than Chilwell and Shaw, who would be in my team. And then I'd have Tierney and McGinn in the 26, I think. Martin, tell us what the 11 is then.
So yeah, well, to mix it up a little bit, because obviously we did the Croatia-England 11 last week, and that was based on sort of league ratings. This is still based on league ratings, as Jonathan will be pleased to hear. But this time we've done it on starts alone, just so it mixes it up, the team a little bit, makes a few more talking points in there. And because it is, I completely agree. Personally, in my team, Andy Robertson would be there. I think he's possibly the best left back at the tournament. But on league rating last season, on league form, it is Luke Shaw ahead of him at left back. That's the real sort of talking point. And Luke Shaw was excellent in the league last season, and Andy Robertson perhaps not at his best. So it's maybe not as surprising as it sounds. But there are 2 Scotland players in the team. At centre back, this was based on the fact that Harry Maguire wasn't playing. So we did this. And I still don't think he'll play, so I'm going to stand by it. And Liam Cooper actually got a better rating than Tyrone Mings last season in the Premier League, marginally. So Liam Cooper makes our team. Dan is not impressed whatsoever with that.
How many clean sheets? I don't know off the top of my head how many clean sheets Leeds kept, but Villa had the third or fourth best defence in the league, didn't they?
They did, yeah. But there's more stats than clean sheets, Dan.
Defending's not just about keeping goals out.
We had an excellent keeper, and so did they, but they had a bit more of an error-prone keeper, I'd say, but very good. But anyway, so Liam Cooper is the first one alongside John Stones. And then the second one, based on starts alone, should be said, is Scott McTominay comes in. And obviously neither of you mentioned him. I don't know if either of you think he could possibly come in, but he just got the nod over Declan Rice, actually, alongside Calvin Phillips. So it's McTominay and Phillips in that double pivot mount ahead. And Foden comes in on the right ahead of Sancho based on starts alone. Still your boy Super Jack on the left.
I mean, I know who I'd rather have, and it's not McTominay, but he's a good player. He's obviously a very good player. But yeah, I think, I don't know, Rice sort of feels a more dynamic player than McTominay. I know McTominay started to add goals to his game, but I don't know. I still think Rice is a more sort of athletic presence. That partnership with Phillips looked like it was working. So, I mean, England already have a problem with Henderson. That I can't see how Henderson plays in that team unless Mount moves to the wing and you lose a forward, and you play all three sort of more defensively minded midfielders. You've got Bellingham as well to play in middle of midfield. So, I mean, I guess it'd be nice to have McTominay floating in your provisional squad if 5 of them got injured, but he's not getting in my team. I'm sorry.
I think really, if you're being honest, England wouldn't need anyone from Scotland, would they? Because the strongest Scotland players, England are already well blessed and well stocked in those areas. So feasibly, Martin, wouldn't be any.
Yeah, I don't think anyone could argue if you didn't pick any. But I do think, like I said, I think Andy Robertson's, I'll say the best left back at this tournament. And he, like I said, he played very well in that first game. He was the real threat. Created more chances than any other player actually in the first round of fixtures. So for a team like Scotland, that's very good. Certainly in the first half, I thought he showed his class. He did stand out basically compared to his Scotland teammates, I think, in terms of just showing his class.
Well, let's continue to preview England versus Scotland on Friday night. Let's go and talk to BetVictor's Sam Boswell and find out about all the markets ahead of that game and Euro 2020 in general. We're now joined by Sam from BetVictor once again to talk through all the movers and shakers in the market. But we'll start, Sam, with the competition, the one everyone wants to hear about. 2 free £25 bets being given away by BetVictor for people who listen to this podcast. Talk us through it.
Yeah, right. So as per, they've just got to head to the YouTube channel, get the comments in below. So the all-important question is, who is the only player in Scotland's Euro 2020 squad to have scored more than 5 international goals? So obviously we're going on the England-Scotland theme, but it's going to favour you if you're a Scottish fan, or you're going to need to do your homework. So who is the only player in Scotland's Euro 2020 squad to have scored more than 5 international goals? As per usual, the standard terms and conditions do apply, and we encourage everyone to gamble responsibly. But best of luck if you're entering, and fingers crossed, you might get picked out the hat if you get the answer right.
I mean, Martin and myself are both sitting here quite smug because I think we both know who it is, but we're not gonna enter the competition, obviously, because we wouldn't be drawing out the hat to win. Sam, been a big first week of the Euro. It's been an enjoyable first week, actually. How's it been at BetVictor?
Busy, yeah. It's been a fantastic first week. People have been getting stuck in. We've obviously launched our player markets as well, which have been popular. And we've had a real mix of results. Some days it's certainly been in favour of the punter. Other days, bookmakers have done very well. Quick nod to when both Poland and Spain lost. That was a huge swing in favour of the bookmakers. Any 0-0 is always a popular kind of result. But I must say, people are now picking up on this sort of move for the Italians, I'm going to call it. It's kind of starting to really, really pick up. Obviously, they were impressive in the first game. A few people, I think, were a little bit sceptical about how impressive you could read into one performance. But since then, really, it's kind of picked up. Obviously, they're now, at time of recording, a 5-1 shot for the tournament, considering they were significantly bigger beforehand. That they're definitely a shortener in the market. France, give them a mention. Obviously, they had the tricky group, but now 100-30. I think we ended up going off 9-2 favourites on the French. So they've shortened as well. England sat there 5-1 ahead of their game with Scotland on the weekend. And I'll give a quick nod to Portugal, who are 8-1 still. So, yeah, it's interesting to see who's moved. Interesting to see who hasn't. The Germans out to 12-1, obviously, after that defeat. And the Welsh will give them a mention that they are 80-1 now. Obviously, they did end up progressing so well at the Euros last time. You do just wonder who's going to be that big outsider that's going to nudge their way through. And there's plenty of possible candidates, but at the moment, it does look like French and Italy backers are going to probably be the happier of the two as their prices shorten.
You sat there in your England 2006 shirt. Let's talk about England versus Scotland. What's going on the markets there?
Right. Obviously, it's a huge game, but the market is incredibly lopsided. And we actually had it priced up prior to both teams playing their first game. As a result of how Scotland performed and how England performed, England now 3-10 on, 4-1 the draw, 10-1 Scotland. Now, I know Scotland didn't look great, if we're perfectly honest. I thought they were a little bit unlucky when they hit the bar. I thought 10-1 was a little bit insulting to our Scottish supporters, I must say. But England obviously bound to be popular, going to go off a short price. We've already preloaded loads of boosts in there, ranging from England to win both teams to score. That's 11-4. England over 7.5 corners now 9-5 from 13-8. Andy Robertson to be shown a card. Obviously, card betting for this tournament, as someone that enjoys getting stuck into a card bet, I found it really tricky. We've seen games without a single yellow being shown, keepers not really being booked for time wasting. But if ever there was a game that should get a few cards flowing, surely it's going to be England-Scotland at Wembley.
Yeah, you'd have absolutely thought so. The old enemy. Jack Grealish is playing. There'd definitely be cards all over the place because he's the most fouled player in world football. Talk to us briefly about the Golden Boot market. It's something that we've spoken about before. How's that shaping up? Yeah,
as you can expect, these prices change really quickly, but we do our best to keep the market up straight after the games have been played. Lukaku now 11-4. Obviously, he made a great start to life in the group that he's in, and I think it's fair to say he was always going to be popular. He went off favourite. 11-4 now. We are still playing the 4 places each way, and one of the bigger movers in that was Cristiano Ronaldo. His late goals against Hungary, he's now 9-2. He went off 12-1. So if you took that price each way, I think you're probably going to be very likely to be getting a return on that. Italy backers, Immobile's now 8-1. Harry Kane out to 12. So he was obviously nearly, I think he went off 5-1, second favourite with ourselves for the Golden Boot. Obviously, a blank first game doesn't help him, but a quick double against Scotland will soon have him back there. Kylian Mbappe's next in there at 12-1 as well. Obviously, some of what we saw of him was just outstanding. I'm still disappointed that he had his goal chalked off. That would have been one of the epic Euro goals of all time. But, those are the rules and that's what they're there for. But he's a 12-1 shot. Much bigger the rest, I must say. It does sort of seem to be centering around those front 4, really. And Harry Kane, if he blanks against Scotland, I can see him drifting out to probably as big as 20-1. He has got previous against Scotland is the only things in previous qualifiers, so hopefully he can get himself off the mark. Now, Martin, I understand you've got something up your sleeve ahead of the game on Friday night. Tell us more.
I do indeed. I've got another bet builder. Obviously, we did one for England-Croatia, and as Sam said, the cards have been quite hard to predict, but just a little hat tip to myself. I did get the 2 cards in that game right. I got Brozovic and Chileta to be booked, and they both were. So I got the 2 difficult legs right, basically, and then Kane to score and both teams to score didn't come in. So hopefully we can go 1 or 2 better this time. I am on the cards again, as Sam says. I think that'll be a popular bet in this game. So I'll start there, and the first one is pretty obvious. I think it would be the favourite in the cards market is John McGinn. Ended the season as the most booked player in the Premier League, courtesy of 5 bookings in his last 5 games, which took him to 12 yellow cards for the season. So he's obviously a main shout for that yellow card market. With players like Mason Mount around him, he'll certainly have a busy game. The other one I've gone for, which I've tried to find the value in the cards market for this one, is Andy Robertson. And Sam mentioned it at the top there. He's not a very booked player, which doesn't sound like a great reasoning for this tip. But when it comes to Scotland, his record is different to Liverpool, as you'd expect, playing for a sort of less dominant side. So I think that's maybe seen his odds come in a little bit too long. He was only booked 3 times across all competitions for Liverpool last season. He was booked in 3 of 4 Nations League games, though, for Scotland. And you just think Scotland are going to have to set their stall out. Andy Robertson's the captain. He's going to be up against Foden or Grealish or Sterling. So he's going to be up against a formidable opponent. And I just think he'll want to set his stall out. He was one of the Scotland players that played very well, I thought, in that first game. So I think he'll want to set the tone. And I could see potentially a relatively early booking in this game, and maybe it could be him. So I've gone for Robertson and McGinn to be booked. And then the last tip in it is for England to score 2 or more goals in the second half of the game. Obviously, this tournament's been heavily swung in terms of second half goals. That is relatively normal. There's always more goals in the second half, tends to be. But the swing this time around is quite strong. There's only been 10 first half goals and 24 second half goals. All of England's 11 wins this season have seen them score in the second half, and they've scored at least 2 goals in the second half of each of their last 4 games against Scotland. So England 2 or more goals in the second half, McGinn to be carded and Andy Robertson to be carded. The original price is 31-1 at the time of the request, and that's been boosted to 45-1. So a nice boost there. So as ever, we'll have the link to our sort of boosts tips page in the description of this video, and we'll put it out on Twitter as well. But yeah, that's my tip for this week's Bet Builder.
I think we've been really generous with that, to be perfectly honest. I'm sat here thinking, I'm not sure I'd have gone 45-1. But one thing I would say on the card bets, just looking through who people are picking, I do think there's been a big impact, and the only advice I can give to people watching is looking at the stats that I've got access to. Is I think you need to make sure you've got players that are going to probably be likely, injury aside, to play the 90. The additional subs are definitely hitting the issue of cards, I think, a little bit as well. I think both the players you selected for Scotland, both likely to play the full game. I would suggest Andy Robertson, I think he is literally going to have one of the games of his life if Scotland are going to get a result. And John McGinn as well. Both should be there for the duration. So yeah, I think that's a really, really good shout. And it's just a little tip to look out for if you are trying to have some player card bets. I think you need to try and find players. And it's almost easier probably picking players from a lesser nation that have standout individuals rather than in England, where we saw Harry Kane come off, which I was a little bit surprised in the first game. I'd have thought he'd be desperate to stay on to get the goal. But Gareth's got a wealth of ability and talent sat on that bench. And I'm looking forward to hearing you guys dissect how you see the England game playing out a bit later on.
Well, as ever, Sam, thanks ever so much for coming on and having a chat with us. And we'll speak to you again next week when hopefully a few people have took some money off Bet Victor.
Yeah, hopefully they will. And hopefully I'll still be wearing the England shirt. It's the good luck charm now. Have to keep it going. So take care, guys, and looking forward to listening to the rest of the show.
Right then, time now for the Just a Minute section. So we're going to come to you, Martin. Your first game to talk through in just 1 minute is Netherlands versus Austria.
The Boers side made a lightning fast start to their game against Ukraine, with 7 of their 15 shots coming inside the opening 10 minutes, although it took until the second half to break the deadlock. Matthijs de Ligt wasn't fit to make the squad for the opener, but could come back into contention to replace teenager Jurien Timber. De Boer substituted 3 of his back 5 during the game, while Martin Stekelenburg was a surprise star over Tim Krul. One of those that did play the full 90 was match winner Denzel Dumfries, who was a constant threat against Ukraine and one that Austria will need to counter. With that in mind, it will be interesting to see where David Alaba starts, having done so nominally at centre-back against North Macedonia, but once again popping up all over the pitch. Having both scored from the bench, Michael Gregoric and Marko Arnautovic will have been hoping to come into contention, but the latter has been banned for this match for insulting North Macedonia's Ezjan Alioski during his celebration. These sides have met 5 times since the turn of the millennium, with the Dutch winning all 5, scoring 15 in the process. So I fancy another high-scoring affair tonight.
Yeah, I think that'll be a cracker tonight, actually, a really open and good game. What's your score prediction then, Martin?
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to go for Netherlands 3, Austria 1.
Jonathan, your turn. Denmark versus Belgium.
I mean, obviously, everything around this game is overshadowed by the Christian Eriksen situation. I think there'll be a lot of tributes in the stands. Obviously, Romelu Lukaku plays him at Inter and is close to him and paid tribute to him in his goal celebration against Russia. And so, I'm always a little bit anxious about sort of talking about specific football things when something so much more important is there. But clearly that does affect how the game will go, because you don't know whether Denmark might be cowed by that, and certainly they'll miss his creativity, or perhaps they'll be inspired by that they have a common purpose to play for. So Jensen will come in for him, but you would worry about Denmark scoring goals. Belgium already had injury problems in midfield, although Eden Hazard, De Bruyne and Witsel could all be back, but none of them will be fully fit. Castagne's out. Vertonghen could be out. They met twice last year in the Nations League. Belgium winning 4-2 and 2-0, and I fancy it to be 2-0 Belgium again, given the lack of Danish creativity.
Martin, Sweden versus Slovakia.
Having both secured shock results in round one, both teams will feel that they have a great shot at progressing now. But it's Sweden that will no doubt be going into this all out for the victory. They know anything short of a win may well make their final group game with Poland a win at all costs game for both involved. While Slovakia would almost undoubtedly be happy with a point that should be enough to see them through. 34-year-old Mikael Lustig was forced off with a muscle injury in Spain, so will more than likely be replaced by Emil Kraft. Both Matthias Svanberg and Dejan Kulusevski could be back available, having missed the group opener with COVID, but are more likely to come into contention for the Poland game. Elsewhere, Alexander Isak was the star turn in Seville, putting on a plate for Marcus Berg, whose miss may see him get the chop with Robin Quaison and Jordan Larsson waiting in the wings. Slovakia were very fortunate to get the win over Poland, even with a man advantage, and in all likelihood will look to suck the life out of the game that was hardly an enticing prospect to begin with. That man, Isak's first ever start for Sweden as a 17-year-old, came against Slovakia, opening the scoring in 6-0 friendly rout. But while the scoreline will be wildly different, he may be the difference once more.
I gave you a little bit of extra time there, Martin, because we're making good time on the podcast this week, so I thought I'd let you off. Give me your prediction.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a classic, but I do think Sweden, like I said, will just have that quality. So 1-0 Sweden.
Jonathan, Croatia v the Czech Republic.
Well, this has become a really key game, I think, now with Croatia's defeat in their opening game. And in that game, they look really old and sluggish and slow. They've lost 4 players since the World Cup final, who've retired. And there's clearly a bit of tension in the squad as young players are integrated. So I guess the issue for them is, where do they find a spark? Where do they find some creativity? They do have Nikola Vlasic, who'd be the obvious player to provide that. But if he comes in, who misses out? The player who normally misses out is Kovacic, but he was probably their best player against England, certainly in terms of keeping possession. So I think that's a huge problem for them. They should have Barisic back at left back, which is a problem area for them. So they do have that advantage. The Czechs, we knew they were going to be tough and good from set plays. They proved that against Scotland. That, I think, is a major threat for Croatia. But the Czechs weren't quite as good defensively as I've been expecting. Only let in 6 in the final 7 qualifiers, but they were a bit more open. The Czechs haven't beaten Croatia in 3 attempts. I suspect they won't here. I reckon 1-1 for this one.
Martin, Hungary versus France.
A back-to-the-wall performance against Portugal almost did the trick, but once Hungary conceded late on, the floodgates opened, and the worry will be that the game will have taken its toll. Nevertheless, the tactics will be very similar against the tournament favourites, having restricted the holders to a modest 11 shots in game week 1. By contrast, France will no doubt change tack completely, having sat in themselves for large periods against Germany and sprung out on the counter. They'll have no such chance this weekend, so may need to be patient with another packed-out Puskas Arena roaring the hosts on. Benjamin Pavard suffered a heavy blow to the head against Germany, and while he was somewhat bemusingly allowed to play on, Leo Dubois is waiting in reserve should the Bayern man be feeling any ill effects. Elsewhere, Adrien Rabiot got the nod over Corentin Tolisso in the only real selection dilemma for Deschamps, but it wouldn't be a surprise if the tables turned this time around. Paul Pogba ran the show against Germany, and his guile could be required to break down a stubborn Hungarian resolve. Once they do make that breakthrough, however, this game should follow the pattern of Hungary's opener, so I would go for another 3-0 defeat for Hungary, 3-0 to France.
It's one of my favourite games so far, just because of the Puskás Arena. Watching the Hungary fans, I really, really enjoyed the atmosphere that they generated. Jonathan, your final one is weird Spain, I'm going to say, against Poland.
Well, you say weird, but the odd thing about watching these two teams in their first games was they followed exactly the pattern of what feels like every Spain team, every Poland team I've ever seen. You think Spain's last game in Russia against Russia, when they just passed the ball and passed the ball and passed the ball and passed the ball and got absolutely nowhere. And against Sweden, although they did have some chances, it was kind of the same. And that despite Luis Enrique seeking to impose this sort of more direct approach. And I think Luis Enrique is more generally concerned about the way Spanish football is going. I think he feels it's not quick enough, that it's fallen slightly behind the rest of Europe or the rest of elite Europe. So that's a really interesting issue for him, how he resolves that. You wonder if Morata, who missed once again that glorious chance, you wonder if he might miss out for Gerard Moreno, who had such a good season with Villarreal. But Poland, likewise, they turn up to major tournaments. They always have one or two excellent players, obviously Lewandowski here. and they always somehow don't quite make it. Their plodding centre-backs may really struggle against Spain, so I suspect Spain will score here, but probably not too many. So let's say 2-0 Spain.
Very good. And your final one, Martin, it's the Swiss against Turkey.
Yeah, like we said earlier, Turkey have been one of the real disappointments of the tournament so far, having gone from boasting the best defensive record in qualifying, conceding just 3 goals, to looking likely to concede 3 every 10 minutes in this tournament. They were outclassed by Italy and outrun by Wales. Their -5 goal difference could prove insurmountable, even if they do manage to win this. Şenol Güneş doesn't really have much left in reserve to shake things up either, making 2 changes to the side that lost to Italy. Their reliance on a 35-year-old striker that has just come through a long season in attack has proven costly thus far, with no adequate backup to captain Burak Yilmaz. They'll feel like they should have beaten Wales, Switzerland, but were no match for Italy, and also now must win this game, really. Vladimir Petkovic named an unchanged side in midweek and could look to freshen things up, but like Turkey, they don't really have any great strength in depth. The teams haven't met since Euro 2008, when a last-minute Arda Turan winner set Turkey on their way to the eventual semi-final exit. This time around, morale will be low in the Turkish camp, though, and if they don't tighten up at the back, they risk going out of the tournament with the wooden spoon. So I'm actually going to compound things. I'm going to go for a Switzerland win 2-1 against Turkey.
Let's look ahead at some games in a little more detail now. We've got Portugal against Germany, Saturday tea time. And Martin, talk to me about Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah, he's inescapable, isn't he? Even though, he didn't play particularly well, I don't think, in that game.
No, he didn't. He
obviously missed that sitter in the first half. At half-time, he was actually our lowest-rated player on the pitch. Scored 2 late goals, obviously one of them a penalty, but scored 2 late goals to end up the game as who scored man of the match, courtesy of that brace. But yeah, you have to admire his sort of record in these competitions. Although an interesting fact, obviously he scored 11 goals, but only against 5 teams. So that's 4 goals he scored against Hungary at the Euros now. I think he's got 3 against the Netherlands, 2 against the Czech Republic, or the other way around. So yeah, he's only actually scored against 5 teams in this tournament and racked up 11 goals against them. Not that that means anything, but just an interesting stat. So yeah, he's like I said, he's inescapable, isn't it? And he makes sure that's the case with his wild celebrations for a third goal at the last minute. I think everyone had that friend, didn't they, who's just scored tap-ins and whipped his top off and sort of paraded around, and that's certainly what he is. But yeah, fair play to him. I can't really go beyond that.
Jonathan, because we've done previously just Premier League shows, I've never ever spoken to you about Ronaldo. What are your thoughts on him in general?
I think he's become massively problematic. Even I'd say his last couple of years at Real Madrid, his goal output is incredible. So there's an argument having him in the team just because of that. And Messi's a bit the same way now. But he does disrupt the structure of the side, and he does create problems for teams. And so I think at Real Madrid, because of the nature of Real Madrid, it's a much less the style of play they've played recently, and certainly under Zidane, has been far less based on patterns and on cohesion. They could get away with it, but I think Juventus have really struggled. I think giving him to Sarri was, Sarri, an absolutely systems-driven manager. Ronaldo, somebody who famously sort of sneers at coaches who can't do what he can do. Even somebody like Rafa Benitez with an incredible track record was never going to work with Sarri. You look at him this season, the season just finished in Serie A, and although he got, I think, 29 league goals, only 2 of them were against other teams in the top 5. So I think he missed one of the Milan games, but in the other 7 games, 2 goals, pretty anonymous. And he was anonymous, as you said, he was anonymous till he got the 2 goals. Maybe international football, you're less inclined to look for the system, less inclined to look for structure, that his goals output is enough. And he got, 11 goals, I think, in qualifying. Now the leading all-time scorer in the European Championship, 3 behind Ali Daei's all-time record, which is clearly what he's desperate to get at this tournament. But there comes a point at which that becomes problematic, especially when you have the extraordinary attacking depth that Portugal have. That if he hadn't got those 2 goals, and Portugal were really lucky in that game, I thought. I mean, they're the better side, obviously they're the better side. But the breakthrough goal is 84th minute, a deflected pass followed by a deflected shot. There's a million universes in which that didn't go in. And then you get to the end of that game and you think, well, hang on, you've failed to break down Hungary, and you've got João Felix on the bench, you've got Andre Silva on the bench, having scored, however many goals it was for Eintracht Frankfurt this season. And I think you would start to you wouldn't be dropping Ronaldo, but at least people like me would be starting to ask the question, which is enough to justify Colin, which is all I'm actually interested in. So I think he's in a really interesting position in his career, and I guess the dream for him is he wins this tournament, breaks Ali Dayu's record, and he can retire without ever having to be dropped.
Yeah, João Felix not even getting off the bench, Martin. It's a crazy team they've got there, but I didn't think they looked great either.
No, but they really do. I think that obviously they drew their way to the title last time out, and it's Fernando Santos, isn't it? He's a very pragmatic coach. Like I said in the just a minute section, they only had 11 shots against Hungary, and obviously a lot of those came at the end of the game. And interestingly, they scored all 3 goals minutes after Andre Silva came on. I'm not saying he impacted the goals directly, but that shift in putting on another natural striker certainly helped. So but their firepower is incredible. If you look at the sort of top scorers in the two teams, like combined between Portugal and Germany, it really highlights Germany's issues and sort of highlights the sort of wealth of talent that Portugal have. So the goal scorers for Portugal this season in the league, Ronaldo is top with 29, but Andre Silva 28, Pedro Goncalves, who sort of fired Sporting to the title, got 23. Bruno Fernandes is only 4th on 18 in their squad. They got Sergio Oliveira, penalty taking midfielder at Porto. He got 13. You look at Germany's squad, their top scorer from their squad in the league last season was Kevin Volland, and he's not going to start. Came on, had a bit of a nightmare his last 2 touches against France. I didn't think he'd done badly up to that point, and then it was just compounded his own error. But he got 16. He's the top scoring German in that squad, and second is Ilkay Gundogan. So with 13, which is a good tally. But then you're looking at Thomas Müller, 11, Robin Gosens, who's the left wing back with 11. So he scored more than Gnabry, Havertz, Werner, Sané. So those are the front 4 that you're looking at to choose from. So that showed in their game against France. They just lacked that final sort of that cutting edge, really. I thought Werner came on and looked really poor. I'm starting to feel sorry for him because he's had a torrid, everything he does seems to go wrong now. But he's just so lacking in confidence. So obviously they lined up with Havertz and Gnabry up front. They might look for more pace in this game, maybe with Sané or Werner, because they did look a bit slow. They don't have a lot of pace in that team otherwise. Gnabry's fast, but he's not rapid. And beyond that, no real pace in their team. So that might be something they look at. But their options up front are just what are going to cost them, really, because they did dictate that game for a lot of it. They didn't play that badly. But again, lack of pace in attack, but also lack of pace at the back as well. It was really prominent, wasn't it? So, it's tough to look beyond Portugal for me for this one.
Because Jonathan, Portugal will probably sit in that game. Martin's calling for pace. I'd say they maybe need a little bit more craft, because I can't say that pace is going to do anything against Portugal, because I think they'll just be happy to sit in.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is Jogi Löw's been exposed as a coach who hasn't adapted to the modern game. And weirdly, what's really undone him is every attempt he's made to adapt. So I still think the best Germany, the best of his Germanys was the 2010 World Cup side, when they were very much a counter-attacking team. And he keeps on trying to shift away from that to something more proactive. But it always falls apart. And in 2014, they did that. They tried to be more proactive. Very lucky not to lose to Ghana. Very lucky to get past Algeria. And then he went back to a counter-attacking approach for the final 3 games. Counter-attacking doesn't mean you don't score goals. They 4 against England and Argentina in 2010, 7 against Brazil in 2014. But he seems obsessed by trying to prove a point and do it by taking the game to the opposition and playing their half. But defensively, Germany have been all over the place, certainly since the 2018 World Cup. You think of how Mexico ripped them apart on the break, how South Korea ripped them apart on the break. We've seen Spain do that, and that's 6-1 in the Nations League. So North Macedonia beat them in Germany with basically by counter-attacking. And Portugal are a really good counter-attacking team. So I look. It's in Munich, which should help. but the way Löw's chopped and changed the formation, he played 3-4-3 after the World Cup. Then he went back to back four, and he's gone back to 3-4-3. He'd left out Hummels and Müller. He brings them back sort of in desperation just before the tournament. The defending on the France goal was an absolute shambles. Just players not knowing where they needed to be. The two notional holding midfielders get caught in front of the ball for a throw-in. How does that happen? That's ludicrous. We've seen it, Gundogan. I mean, Gundogan, sort of the top scorer of the players you expect to start. We saw him not play particularly well as the deepest lying midfielder in the Champions League final, and yet he's playing as the deepest lying midfielder. They've got a problem with Kimmich. Kimmich is probably the most creative midfielder, the most intelligent midfielder, but he's having to play at right wing back because they don't have any fullbacks. I'm not impressed by Gersons at all. They've got no centre forward. They've got this fleet of incredible sort of attacking midfielders who don't necessarily score goals, but that doesn't make a team. And the lack of pace at the back is a big problem, particularly when you're trying to play a high line with a goalkeeper who wants to push out. So it's an extraordinary. I can't think of another team in the entire history of football who's been so much less than some of their parts.
You have absolutely ripped them to shreds there, but I think everything that you said was completely true. But I don't think until you've just reeled off all those things, I realised how many problems they had.
Well, I mean, the extraordinary thing is, you think of the Confederations Cup in 2017 when they were magnificent in winning that. They looked brilliant. You just sort of thought, oh, this is if it's basically Germany and France are going to go on and dominate European football for the next 10 years because they both have such strength and depth, great young players coming through. Then you get to the World Cup, and I mean, I was very fortunate. I was in Kazan. I did that game when they lost to South Korea, and it's one of the most extraordinary games I've ever been at. Because when you're doing a match reports, you have to write it to file it on the final whistle, and all the way through the game, my eyes are saying Germany are terrible. Germany are losing this, and my brain's going, Germany never lose this kind of game. And so it gets to 80 minutes, and I still haven't written the intro because I just sort of think there's no point in writing the intro because South Korea won't win this. And then just to start to write it, South Korea scored that goal, which was ruled out for offside from the corner. And you think, oh, well, at least that's wasted 30 more seconds. Germany's still in trouble here. And then you see the replay and you realise it's come off a German toe. And that moment in the press box, as everybody suddenly realises at one of, hang on, this is going to get overturned. This goal's going to stand, was one of the most electric moments I ever remember covering football. Of kind of, they're going out. Germany are actually going out. This brilliant Germany squad are going to lose this game, and they're in massive crisis and massive trouble. But you still sort of assume with that wealth of talent that would be a blip. But it hasn't been a blip. It's kept going.
I've got nothing to add. I think you've summed it up excellently. We move on to Sunday now with a quick look at Italy versus Wales. We'll start with Italy, Martin. They look absolutely deadly serious, don't they?
Yeah, definitely comfortably the most impressive team for me so far. Just because they look like they've got a plan, they've got a way of playing, and they look excellent at both ends. They're sort of just keeping everything out of the back. They're not defending perfectly, but they're throwing bodies on the line and blocking every shot that comes in, and then they're just so free flowing. And I agree with you what you said earlier about Jorginho. He's had an outstanding start to the tournament. Obviously Locatelli as well, who many people thought would be sort of filling the shoes of Verratti for now, but that's a big call now, isn't it? Because Marco Verratti could be back for the Wales game. Whether they risk him or not, I don't know. But what do you do beyond that? Obviously, you have to bring Verratti in, but do you drop Locatelli or do you drop Barella now? Because I don't think you can drop Jorginho. So that'll be another good headache to have, but only strengthens them, doesn't it? So they look really, really strong, look really good in the fullback positions, which I thought could be an issue. Chiellini obviously went off, didn't he, against
that was horrible moment. I was tweeting how pleased I was that he'd scored. Then he got disallowed, and then I'm writing my tweet, and he goes off with his hamstring injury.
Yeah.
What a sad evening! I nearly went to bed. I was so sad about it.
Yeah, but the way he went off, he was trying to play it down, wasn't he? As like, it's no big deal. I'm just being cautious. But what is he? 37?
He's older than me.
Yeah.
I know every player that's older than me. He's older than me.
So yeah, aging. Let's put it that way. And so. They've got Acerbi who came in and did well enough, and he's a very good centre-back. And I think on form over the league, you're looking at Acerbi and Bastoni have probably played better than the two Juventus centre-backs. But something Spinazzola said in his press conference after the first game the strength that the rest of the team just take from Bonucci and Chiellini being there, that their charisma and stuff is so important. So I'm happy to cede defeat on that one, that they should be playing, and certainly proved it so far. So yeah, I think any question marks, obviously there were question marks about Immobile as well, whether he can score the goals. Scored in both games. He's missed chances, but scored in both games and looked lively. He's a workhorse. He works really hard for the team, and that's what we've seen throughout the team. So they've been playing great football, but the work ethic's been superb. They're pressing until the very last minute. I guess it's just a case of whether they can sustain that throughout the whole tournament.
It's because they get themselves pumped, even from the national anthem. They're ready. They're ready.
Incredible.
By far the best national anthem.
Love it.
England
can't even start on the right note. They always start late. It always annoys me so much. I get that there might be a delay or whatever in the stadium, but it annoys me. They're all off time. Oh God, can't stand it. Not a great anthem anyway, but yeah.
Okay. And Jonathan, Wales now, astute Euros performers in modern times.
Oh, I mean, they were sensational against Turkey. Really enjoyed that game. If you want to be critical, they should have won that 3 or 4-0. They had enough chances. At least, the penalty, but Ramsey's 2 chances before he scored. But yeah, they looked exceptional, and that was one of those really enjoyable games. Occasionally, a group game gets the feel of a knockout game, and that's the last 20 minutes of that game that had that feel of Wales suddenly sort of realising, hang on, we're 1-0 up here. If we hang on to this, we're through. I mean, 95%, 99% certainty they're through. So yeah, I guess they test themselves against Italy. I don't know what Italy will do, actually. I don't know if Italy will make big changes. I always think it's a massive risk. I understand the temptation, particularly when you play that style as dynamic as Italy's, that you think, we'll keep players fresh. But I do think momentum is a big issue in tournaments. And I'm suddenly reminded of a piece I wrote in 2010, which I probably should have done more research on this since, but given I haven't, let's just go with this. So in year 2008, which is one of the problems of having when points level, determining it by head-to-head rather than goal difference. Going into the final group games in the year 2008, I think in all 4 groups, the team who's going to be top knew they were going to be top, or at least knew they were going through. And all of them made massive changes. And 3 of them lost the quarterfinal. Spain were the other ones, and they drew against Italy and won on penalties, which is the only game they didn't win in the tournament. So all of them had a dip in the quarterfinals, having rested significant numbers of players. And I do think that is a danger. I think momentum is such a big factor in tournaments. It's only 7 games. And as Croatia proved at the last World Cup, you can find extra reserves of strength in the 6th or 7th games because it's a World Cup semi-final, World Cup final. I think you don't need to be quite as protective as you would be in a league season. And also, international teams don't get much of a chance to play together. And it's not the worst idea in the world to practice that if you have the opportunity. Now, obviously, if you've got a player who, like Chiellini, feeling a hamstring, don't pick him, clearly. Or if you've got a player who's played 90 minutes, maybe you take him off after an hour in the 3rd game. But I think to change it completely, you do risk breaking up something that's overcomplicating a situation. What if somebody comes in and scores a hat-trick in that 3rd game? Can you leave him out for the last 16? Well, probably not. And then Harry Kane's and they're going, all right, hang on, what's happened here? So, yeah, I think, Italy should not. Teams going into their 3rd game, Italy or whoever, if they know they're through, I think still don't make massive changes.
No, I agree with you. Spot on. We'll finish with our panelist pick section in association with Bet Victor. Obviously, the whole podcast is in association with Bet Victor, but this is where we have the power and we pick some bets ourselves. I would say we've not been too ambitious this week with what we picked. But last week, we did have a winner, Martin. You picked out a 15-2 for Romelu Lukaku to score 2 or more goals. I backed it as well. I've had Bet Victor's pants down. £10 I had on that. I go with his 2+ goals there. A nice windfall for me. What are we doing this week?
Well, can I just say, after 83 minutes of that Ukraine-Netherlands game, mine was looking really good as well.
Yeah, I did yours
score
as well.
Ukraine's to win, and that was what, 11-1 or something.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't great at 2-0. I accept. But...
the only one I didn't back was my own.
Yeah, it was better than Dan's.
Which was right. I don't think McGinn even had a shot in the whole game.
But I sort of think if you've got an 11-1 bet and you've got 6 minutes plus injury time for one team to score for that to come off, you'd take that, right?
Yeah, definitely. What have we got this week, Martin? How are we getting their pants down this week?
So we're going to go for a treble this time rather than single tips. So with trebles, always best to do them on the same day because people don't want to bet on an accumulator over a number of days. And Saturday's games just lined up nicely for us in terms of strong teams playing. So we're looking at a goal scorer, anytime goal scorer treble, and we've got that boosted. So you guys have obviously picked, I think you're the France game, aren't you, Dan, the first game?
Yeah.
So what have you done?
I picked Mbappe to score.
Mbappe to score. Have you got your stats and your reasoning behind?
Because I thought he looked very, very lively. and he did score, and he got disallowed. But I can't imagine him going through 2 games without scoring, without being on the score sheet. So I just think he's my favourite player to watch. I think he's incredible, and yeah, I'd back him to score.
So you're going with due a goal as your reasoning for this.
It's going with sensational player playing Hungary. It's France. There's a multitude of reasons, Martin.
Yeah, no. I think you're right, to be fair.
Nothing especially ambitious or out of the box about this, but I don't know if you've noticed, but Ronaldo tends to score quite a lot of goals.
I've seen that, actually, yeah.
So we went through before why we think Portugal have a very good chance of beating Germany. And it's almost inconceivable to me that Portugal could win that game without Ronaldo scoring, just because he's the focal point of every attack they have. And 11 goals in qualifying, 2 already in this tournament. For all my reservations about what he means for the structure of a team, his goals output remains prodigious. So against the Germany side that looks really wobbly at the back, that seemed to me very hard to look beyond.
Yeah. To be fair, I probably picked the one that was the most interesting to actually pick out an anytime scorer was Spain-Poland.
If you do say so yourself.
The most interesting game, to actually pick from. Just because Spain's problems, obviously, their strikers. Who are you going to bet on Spain to score? Not fancying many at the moment. So I've gone with Lewandowski, which obviously isn't an outside bet, but it is actually with the bookmakers. I think there are 5 or 6 Spain scorers that are more likely in the odds to score than Lewandowski. And obviously he didn't play well in the first game, but I think I'm going to go with your reasoning as well. Due a goal, Dan. It hasn't gone more than 2 internationals without scoring since 2019. So he has been good for Poland recently. He also boasts a strong record against Spanish opposition. He scored more goals against Spanish teams than any other country in the Champions League. He's got 11 goals against Spanish teams. So very fleeting sort of mention of that. And he's also scored more goals on the international stage than the entire Spain squads combined, with 66 to 55. And like I said, Spain, it's difficult to pick. You're probably looking at maybe Ferran Torres, Moreno, Morata, because beyond that, they don't have great strikers, but there's no goals in the midfield. I was looking at it. Their midfield have 262 caps combined. Yeah, I'll let you guess how many goals they've got combined from 262.
6.
Okay, spot on, yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, 6. But yeah, that's remarkable, isn't it? 6 goals from 262 international caps. So yeah.
So which 3 are you picking? Are you including that midfield? Is that Busquets?
So the entire midfield in the squad.
In the squad. Okay, right. Okay.
Yeah. So Busquets, Thiago, Rodri,
Pedri,
Koke, Pedri, all of them. Yeah. So Llorente as well in that. But yeah, I've gone for Lewandowski just because I think he's long, and I think that's the one that boosts it really. And that bet, while I mentioned boosts, the original price 23 to 2, that's been boosted to 16 to 1. A bet Victor for all of those 3 players to score on Saturday. So again, link below, gamble responsibly. Yeah, link in the description, and we'll put this out on Twitter again.
2 of those 3 penalty takers as well, which I always think is an advantage. That looks a decent bet to me. Wouldn't surprise me if we were coming on next show and talking about that being a success. That does do us for this week. Thanks ever so much to Jonathan and to Martin for chatting with me as usual. And thanks ever so much to Bet Victor as well for sponsoring the show and doing all the stuff they're doing with the odds. Really enjoying linking up with them. Back on Monday for another show. Don't forget to turn your notifications on, subscribe, like, comment as well. You have to comment if you want to win the competition, to be fair, with Bet Victor. But yeah, let us know what you think of the podcast. Have a great weekend. Cheers.